This is Alan Willett from Tennis Classroom, and I have a special treat for you today, a guest. My very first guest on this podcast, in fact. His name is Andrew Furmanczyk, and he's a piano and music educator who's been teaching piano a decade and a half, both online and off. He's found success on YouTube, currently at nearly 500,000 subscribers, and last year his senior student won first place in the senior regionals. He's also been on an incredible journey battling an injury, a 14-year struggle with a repetitive strain injury related to playing the piano. Andrew has graciously agreed to join us today and share his story. So if you're a pianist yourself and you're struggling with a related injury, this will clearly be spot on topic for you. But I'm also confident that if you're a musician of any kind struggling with pain and injury, this will still be useful to you in principle, regardless of which instrument you play. So let's get started. Welcome to the classroom, Andrew.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So I'm going to jump right in here. What do you think? Does pain and injury seem to be a common problem that pianists face?
Absolutely. So I wouldn't say for beginner students or people who aren't going under immense stress, but when you get to the kind of intermediate and even definitely at the senior levels of piano, you're basically putting yourself under immense strain and pressure, kind of similar to like a high performance athlete. So when you're pushing yourself to those levels, if you're not doing everything right or something goes wrong, it's pretty common that pianists at some time will have some sort of an injury, sometimes very severe, sometimes mild. But if I had to just ballpark it, I think at least half of senior students, maybe even more, at some point experience some type of pain, stiffness, injury, to the point that it can actually become really debilitating. So I think it's an extremely common problem in the high levels, especially people who are making this into a career or they just have a really strong passion about it.
Do you think there's a lack of understanding about how to treat the cause of this problem, medically and or in the piano teaching realm?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the lack of understanding is definitely there because most pianists are mostly focused on how to get better playing wise, and their teachers are also mostly trained on how to improve playing, but not really about the injuries. And also on the medical side, I think you would be a better authority on this. But medically, I can say from my own experience that I was not having luck with traditional medicine, like what doctors and stuff like that were saying. So I do think that there's a major lack of understanding on how to treat like RSI and tendonitis and tendinosis and stuff like that. Having that pain in the arm is just not understood how to be treated, especially from what I went through.
How did your injury start?
Oh, that's a long question, but it's a good story, I guess. So let's go way back to back when I was a teenager. So I had dreams that I wanted to be a concert pianist, actually. So I practiced about 4 to 6 hours a day, and I was performing maybe about 5 hours on stage per week at different venues, getting paid and stuff like that. So what kind of started everything is I got pericarditis, which is the inflammation of the outer sac of the heart. And one of the side effects of it is, well, these are quite a few, but you have to like sleep sitting up. You've got massive chest pains. You have to basically keep your heart rate low. And it also weakens your whole muscular system. And so I ended up going through that whole, like pericarditis lasted about a month. I was in the hospital for a little while. It's kind of scary. But what ended up happening is I kept getting pericarditis over and over again. And the doctors had prescribed me anti-inflammatories to keep the inflammation in my heart under control. And one of the side effects of anti-inflammatories I found out was actually that they also weaken your muscle system as well. So I think that in combination, that no one really warned me about what was going on. And I kept practicing piano at the same time. So I ended up, my body was in a very bad place because of the illness, but at the same time, I was practicing a lot. However, previous to this whole sickness, my conditioning was quite good, actually, and I didn't experience pain or stiffness very much. But I think in your previous content, you've said that adhesions can kind of build up over time. So I'm kind of curious if maybe the adhesions were already starting to form, and then getting sick was sort of like a catalyst that just made things much worse. So yeah, it's kind of a long, confusing story about how it all started. But it ended up with me not being able to play piano like the way that I used to be able to at all. I went from 4 to 6 hours down to like 5 minutes eventually. It was so bad.
Oh, wow. That's terrible. Well, what treatments did your doctor perform or prescribe?
So I had been going, obviously, for the pericarditis to see the doctor, and they'd been prescribing anti-inflammatories. I was on. Yeah. And then when I got the tendonitis, I don't think I really realized what it was right off the bat. I just noticed there's some pain and stiffness, and I kind of just, played through it because I was a teenager and I didn't really pay too much attention. I was like, oh, I'll be okay. I'll be fine. But what ended up really kind of scaring the crap out of me was when my arms literally started to curl in. So my hands closed up, my wrists curled inwards. And I remember I couldn't even pick up a glass of water or do anything with my hands. And so that's when I was like, whoa, there's something really wrong. So I went to the doctor and they basically said, okay, you need rest. You need to reduce the inflammation. You have tendonitis. You need to take anti-inflammatories. You need to do icing and also go to physiotherapy. So I did that, and basically I did physiotherapy for months, and I did everything they told me to do. So we did the hot and cold treatments for the water. We did the electrode therapy. We did stretching. We did weights and stuff like that. And months had passed, I think maybe 4 or 5 months, I'm guessing, because it's been many years. I kind of forget how long it was, but it was definitely months. And yeah, it wasn't improving at all. So eventually I just stopped going because it was costing money every session to go, and I wasn't seeing any improvement. So it kind of failed basically.
Well, what did you do next? Did you switch your tactics?
Well, at first I was kind of confused. What do I do? I want to beat this. I want to get past this. And I believed that there was some way to fix the problem. So I started to look into maybe I wasn't getting the right nutrition or right sleep or something like that. So I tried to improve my sleep as much as I could. I also improved my nutrition, just eating more fruits and vegetables. But I also tried to take supplements like glucosamine and just the standard stuff that you hear about. But none of it really worked. So then I moved on to, I think acupuncture was the next thing I tried. I did that for, I think that was about 6 months, and I didn't see any improvement with that either. There was minor improvement in the pain when I would just leave, but then the very next day it would be back, and there'd be no improvement in my endurance or anything like that. So that didn't work. Then I tried doing light therapy. So that's where I had this device where it blasts infrared light into the muscles to try to stimulate blood flow. I did that for a couple months. That didn't work. I tried, I actually kind of lost track of all the things I tried. But basically everything that I could find on the internet, I tried it, and nothing worked because I was trying to treat the inflammation, basically. I was trying to reduce the inflammation. So that was, I think, the problem of why it kept failing.
And how did you feel about that at this point after all this stuff that you'd been through?
Oh, man. Well, to say that it was discouraging would be an understatement. At this point, I kind of felt like I was battling something impossible, right? I just felt so defeated. And I think it was, there's a couple of years of me trying everything I can think of. I tried resting it tons. I tried not, stimulating it, just trying to let it heal itself. Nothing was working at all. So I was just super defeated, and I just felt really depressed, actually, very, very depressed. Yeah. Because when your life is made up of something like this, like piano, it's sort of like if you like to go on walks in the park and then suddenly your legs stopped working. So you're not going to be able to enjoy and do what makes you happy. And you feel this immense loss. There's something missing in your life and nothing can fill that void. And it just makes you super depressed. So I was defeated. I felt really sad that I missed it. Just looking at a piano would make me feel sad because I knew I couldn't play it the way I wanted to.
Did you ask any other pianists or maybe a piano teacher for help?
Yeah, I didn't really ask other pianists too much because I knew most of them are not going to have a clue, but I did ask my piano teacher multiple times. Unfortunately, it's not really her fault, but she wasn't trained in how to really deal with any of this. So her advice was basically, talk to your doctor, see what they say, and don't push yourself too hard. She was very understanding, and she never made me feel bad about it. And she tried to work with me for, I think, over a year and a half, trying to get through this until finally it just wouldn't really work. So anyway, she was very kind and understanding, but my piano teacher just she wasn't equipped to deal with the issue.
It kind of sounds like you might have actually given up. Is that the case?
Yeah, basically. I hit this point where I just kind of felt like, okay, so I'm never going to be able to play piano again. This is something I have to deal with and live with now. And it kind of made me go through a lot of stages, how they talk about those stages, like acceptance and anger and all those things. I feel like I went through many different stages where, I was in denial, then I was angry, then I was depressed, and eventually I just gave up hope that I would ever be able to do it. And so I just kind of trained myself to accept that that's the way I was going to be for the rest of my life. And the problem, though, is that accepting it made me stop seeking out new things. And also, it wasn't just piano that was affected. It was my daily life. Like picking up a glass of water hurt, opening a door hurt, driving on the car and holding the steering wheel. I'd feel pain like pulsing down my arms. Just opening the car door would hurt. And then when I had a kid, I have a son, and picking him up would hurt my arms, but I would just still do it anyway. And so it wasn't something that was only affecting piano, it was affecting my entire life, like all around. So, but I just told myself, well, this is kind of what has to happen and just have to suck it up.
Well, how did you start the healing process you're on now?
Yeah, so how did I get to where I am now? So I've actually improved tons. So I started I went from being completely unhopeful to, it was about 6 months ago, my brother, who is a black belt in kickboxing, had an injury in his elbow, and it wouldn't go away after about a year. So his wife, his girlfriend at the time, but his wife now, had also had an injury, and she got PRP treatment done, and then he got it done on his elbow, and he recovered immediately. So he's like, hey, why don't you look into this? Maybe this can help your arms. So I wouldn't say PRP was the magic bullet, but what it did was it actually gave me hope to start looking again. So I did a bunch of research into PRP, and actually that's how I found your course, is because you had an article on PRP. And when I was Googling it, that's how I stumbled upon your course. So, so that was very fortunate, actually. But I ended up I did get the PRP treatment, and it did have an impact, I would say. But I don't think it would have been enough to get everything perfect, because there's more factors to that. But that was basically how I started it. And from there, then I watched your videos, did your course. And I also started getting massage therapy done in real life. I added
excellent.
Some supplement. I tried putting collagen into my diet, which was I found that to be pretty helpful so far. And I think your course was probably the best thing, because it armed me with the knowledge that I needed. Yeah.
So after all these years, all this journey of trying all these things, I mean, could you characterize what's different with the approach you're using now versus before? Yeah.
So I think it was actually when I watched your course, I saw that it wasn't just the inflammation that I needed to treat. That was the problem that I was always missing. Is that I was trying to treat the inflammation, and it was like inflammation equals bad. But inflammation isn't bad. It's part of the natural healing processes. That's what you taught me. And I started to realize, I'm actually targeting the wrong problem here. It's actually the muscle and the tendon being stretched, and basically the adhesions and all these other things that you're talking about. But essentially, tendonitis was more of not an inflammation problem, but a muscle problem. And so the approach now is I'm not taking anti-inflammatories. I'm not trying to fight the inflammation with ice or rest, really. I'm actually trying to work with my body. And that's what you've taught me with the program.
Excellent. Sounds like you're a really great student. You've really encapsulated all that very well.
Well, thank you.
Hey, have you ever had like this thought, this dream, if only I could like go back in time or send a message to my past self when I first started to struggle with this?
Oh, man.
And what you would say?
Oh, yeah, totally. Man, I wish I could have gone back. Like, the first thing I thought when I saw this course material and I started seeing results is like, oh, if only I knew this like half a decade ago or 15 years ago, this would be so much better. But yeah, like, I really wish I could have if I could send a message back in time, I would tell myself, don't treat the inflammation. It's not the problem. Treat your muscles. So stretch them out, break up adhesions, go see a massage therapist to help them work on the adhesions of your arm. And I don't know how I would tell myself to contact you because I don't think your stuff was available back then. But yeah, I would have kind of said those kind of things, is basically don't focus on the inflammation so much because that's just a side effect of the underlying problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for letting me grill you like that. That was really interesting. And if you don't mind switching from Q&A to like more of a discussion, why don't we try and put our heads together on this problem and compare perspectives, starting with the question of why are these piano-related injuries and pain so rampant while the treatment is so ineffective? Why don't you start it off?
Okay. I think piano injuries and the pain are so rampant is because piano really stresses your body out in a way that you would never naturally encounter. Like, there's no other activity that I can think of, chopping wood or lifting stuff, or no natural human activity from the way we are made where piano even compares. Piano pushes your arms and your hands to literally the physical limitations of your body if you go far enough. And so those injuries, I think, are occurring because you're basically like a thoroughbred racing horse and you're pushing yourself to your absolute limit. And when you do that and you don't do it with the knowledge of your own anatomy and how your body works, it's kind of a recipe for disaster, actually, because you have these teachers who, through no fault of their own, because they were never taught any differently either, they don't understand what's going on. Like, I mean, I can't speak for every teacher, but from what I've observed in my own career in the piano and music world is basically the whole psychology around it is, your body kind of tough it out. We don't really know what's going on. If you do, go see a doctor. That's kind of the philosophy is, I'm a piano teacher. I'm just here to make you better at piano. If you have a health problem, go see your doctor. But the problem is the doctors aren't pianists themselves. And I don't think they really understand or sympathize in the same way that a piano teacher could. So I kind of feel like it'd be good if piano teachers had a bit more training on the topic, where they're actually, learning about anatomy, learning about possible injuries, how you could maybe do some strategies to treat those injuries. Not in a super medical sense, but just so that they're armed with sort of your first aid kind of thing. Basic principles of how to keep yourself in a good maintenance form. Because it would be kind of like if we had Olympic athletes that didn't have trainers, like medical trainers that keep them in good, tip-top shape. That's kind of pianists right now, is we're all these Olympic athletes that don't have any support. And when we do have any issues, then we're just cast aside and we just go to the next person who's not having issues.
Yeah, you would never see that these days in any, an athletic trainer, even a coach. There's going to be some attempt to get you to recognize what's going on, maybe teach you better, teach you a more optimal technique or catch what you're doing that's not optimal. Yeah, and I have to say something about conventional medicine, just this allopathic model which sees the symptom as the problem. I mean, you've already outlined this, the inflammation's not the problem. It's a symptom of the healing process, trying to deal with the situation. with these tendon disorders, it's been known for decades that they're not really inflammatory problems. They're degenerative. And yet, you just keep this myth of inflammation as the problem just keeps getting perpetuated and just echoed over and over again. Yeah, and these repetitive strain injuries, they're chronic rather than acute. I mean, if you cut yourself, you're going to be able to watch that cut heal almost like you could make a chart on the wall, and you can see it day by day. Oh, it's healing, it's getting better. And these kinds of repetitive strain injuries are a completely different universe.
Totally. I totally agree with you. And for the longest time I couldn't even find out I didn't even know I had golfer's elbow, because it was called golfer's elbow. So I didn't think it was related to me as a piano player, because that's something golfers deal with. So
right.
It was totally mislabeled for me as a piano player. I didn't even know I had golfer's elbow until this year, after a decade and a half. Like, it's crazy. Like, I don't know, it just feels like there's so much, it's hard to tell what's wrong with you. And piano players are really kind of just left out on their own. But I don't think that there's many other instruments that put your arms and hands under such immense amounts of stress, because I think that piano players have two distinct problems. One is they basically have these very rapid finger movements where they're doing a lot of stress on the fingers, but then also their arms, like their forearms, also have to be, when they're playing big chords. So if you're playing fortissimo, you're playing these big loud chords, like maybe you're playing Rachmaninoff, or you're playing like a big Chopin piece or Beethoven. You have these massive chords where you're slamming your hands repeatedly over and over and over into the keys. And so that causes massive just like stress damage. Like, I used to feel when I'd play a big chord, immediately there'd be pain in my arm right after. So I learned to play a bit softer to kind of protect my arms. But there's also the rapid finger movements. So there's multiple things going on in a piano player's arms. And as far as I've seen, I've never seen like a comprehensive program built just for piano players. Like, everything I've researched is usually more sports related, even though there's tons and tons of piano players out there. And I think a lot of them are suffering kind of in silence. It's something that not is really paid attention to as much as it needs to be.
Well, speaking of small finger motions, rapid finger motions, in my realm, what I see is a particularly high risk of adhesions forming in those finger flexor and extensor muscles and tendons. I hope this doesn't get too technical for people, but when these long tendons that go all the way out to the fingers, when they're starting to pass through the wrist area, they're surrounded by these sheaths that are supposed to cushion and protect and lubricate those tendons, because being so long, and also they get rather close to the surface and they get more vulnerable. Those sheaths are there to protect the tendons, whereas we don't have a sheath around every single tendon in the body.
Yeah.
Like most of the larger tendons don't have these.
They're kind of like subway tunnels, right? They're like subway tunnels.
Yeah, and the train's supposed to just glide right through the tunnel, except that in this case, the train goes back and forth. Yeah. But there's a risk of the subway tunnel getting kind of gunked up with like more and more trash, or in this case, it's the tendon and the sheaths start to get stuck to each other. Not so much that all of a sudden one day you can't, move your fingers. This is happening very gradually, of course, but it builds up over time. And then, you have to use more and more muscular effort to kind of overcome this, and you gradually lose your range of motion. And this is something that's really not that hard to deal with from, either the right therapist can help with this, or the techniques for learning how to deal with this yourself are really pretty simple. It's just that it's rarely taught.
That's pretty interesting, actually.
So that's something I definitely focus on in both when I'm treating people and in my programs. But speaking of programs and treatment for pianists, what do you think about an action plan that we can offer pianists here? Just maybe some of the broad strokes.
Well, I could say what my action plan was after I watched your videos was, it seemed like the number one thing I needed to do was look at the muscles, basically. Because when you have adhesions, how I understood it was that the muscle basically becomes sort of not shriveled up, but it becomes smaller. And if you think of the bone connections, like the connections to your bones, it's like, let's say you have two skyscrapers, like two buildings, and then you have a clothesline in between, right? Mm-hmm. And if the clothesline gets shriveled up and basically becomes more and more, I guess, just smaller, it starts to tighten the line, and it makes the line become really, really rigid and brittle. And so basically your muscle would be the thing that's getting smaller, and then it's applying more, because it's doing that, it's pulling more on the tendons, which is causing inflammation. So it sounded like to me the root cause was to break up the adhesions first. Is that correct? Is that what you'd think?
Yeah, that's the big one. And then, following that up with some stretching, although we have to be careful that we don't stretch too aggressively, especially in the beginning if our muscles are really adhered and shortened, they're not going to respond very well to aggressive stretching, or at least our nervous system isn't going to. It's actually going to fight you on that a little bit. So it's better to do a lot of very brief, more gentle stretches in a row rather than trying to do one big long hold the stretch for 30 seconds or a minute kind of thing.
Yeah. See, that was a big difference from what I was taught by my physiotherapists before, is they would be like, okay, hold this really long stretch for a minute. And then after, my arm would be in so much pain and it would be throbbing and it felt just like it was overkill, like it was destroying my arm basically. And then for the next 3-4 days, it'd be in a massive amount of pain. And then obviously I'd follow that up with more ice and anti-inflammatories, which didn't really help the body heal. And that was one of the things my naturopathic doctor told me when I was getting the PRP is she said, do not take any anti-inflammatories because they literally shut off your body's ability to heal. And I was like, oh.
Right.
I was like, what the heck? Why didn't anyone tell me this before? So it's like you're doing damage to your body, but if you take anti-inflammatories, now it can't heal the damage. So now the damage is kind of like locked in place. So and I'm curious.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm curious, in physiotherapy, did they have you pretty much trying to strengthen your muscles and tendons right from the beginning, or maybe after a short?
Yep, right away. Like first session, they're like, okay, here's some weights. Start doing like basically all these different exercises. But I remember when I started taking your course, you really stressed, don't even do like these aggressive stretches until you've passed breaking up adhesions first. So really it's like break up the adhesions. Once you can start to stretch. I remember I tried doing stretching early on in the program and it was hurting. Like I just did a very small stretch and it was hurting already. So I was like, I backed off. I did more adhesion breakup. Then eventually I could do stretches and it didn't even hurt. Then once I could do stretching for quite a bit, then I moved on to the strength building exercises you showed. Yeah, and those were amazing. Like they were way different than what my physiotherapist was giving us. And they actually had much better.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the major principles. I might be the only one, at least I'm the only one that I know of that's actually telling people to, don't start the strength training exercises until your symptoms are down by like 75 to 90%. That this seems to have much better results for people than trying to fight with trying to strengthen a muscle and a tendon that's in pain and going through cycles of flaring up on you. Otherwise it's just like over aggressive stretching. The strengthening too soon just seems to be like Sisyphusian kind of battling with your injury. It's so sad when I see this.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. If you had, let's say you were a figure skater and you broke your leg, right? The first thing you do is not going to be like, oh, let's get you doing exercises before the leg's healed. Let's just skip the whole cast phase and get right back on the ice. Meanwhile, your leg's all wobbling around. It's like you have to progress in a natural order of recovery, right? Like eventually, you're going to rebuild the muscles when your leg is ready. But it doesn't seem to happen with RSI injuries. It's like, let's just start building that muscle back right away, even though it's already adhesed.
Well, they'll pay lip service to it. They'll say, well, you have to get the inflammation down first, and then we can start strengthening. But there's like this arbitrary time frame, like X number of weeks, and then we're going to start strengthening regardless of like what your symptoms are or whether you can really handle it or not. So it's not really listening to the body or doing things in their proper time and order.
Exactly, because I think everyone has a different amount of damage to their body. Like for me, I had, a decade worth of problems to get over, right? Like it was 14 something years of this issue. So obviously my body had gotten accustomed. Like my muscles were probably used to that adhesion. So it took me a good 2.5 months, I'd say, of releasing the adhesions before stretching became a viable thing. Yeah.
I wanted to say something about a mindset too, and we've kind of alluded to this. I think you have, and I have. I'm not going to tell my story. It's already been told, but I did go through quite a struggle with a tendon injury early on in my career. But this has to do with like taking responsibility for educating yourself, and taking care of your body. Because the tendency is that we want to kind of outsource that to the experts. And back when I had my problem, there was no internet. So all I had was what the doctors were telling me. But nowadays, maybe even the opposite is a bit of a challenge, that there's too much information. But things they're not simple, easy things to deal with. So you really have to, spend some time and dive in and start learning, and then, doing the best you can to take care of your body rather than going to someone else for all the answers,
I know. And I think that's part of the problem, is that people just expect like, oh, my medical doctor is trained to know how to do this. So of course I'm going to take their advice, just like I would take my teacher's advice of how to improve my playing. The problem is though, I think doctors are kind of treating the symptom instead of the problem, like we've already talked about. And also they're not specializing. Like there is no specialist that I know of that specializes in RSI injuries, really. Like there's no doctor. If you go see your GP, they're not going to be specializing in RSI injuries. That's more of like supposed to be the physiotherapist, I think. But I'm not a doctor, obviously. But it just seems like they're not. Am I. yeah. I mean, it just seems like they're not equipped to really help you, because, I kept going to my doctor for over a year, asking him, telling him how much of an issue this was, and he knew that it was a huge issue for me. And he was a great doctor, like he cared and he was listening, but it seemed like he didn't know what to do. Like his knowledge was short. He was just telling me the same stuff that wasn't working, which was ice, rest, reduce inflammation, and then slowly get back into doing your activity. But it didn't work, not at all. So I basically was stuck in that rut for more than a decade because of it. So yeah, I agree. Like you need to take, unfortunately, that's the way things are right now, is that you have to take more responsibility for yourself. And that's something I think a lot of teachers should also do too, is that if you're a piano teacher listening to this, and you have students that are having issues, I think it might seem like it's out of your realm, but no one is going to care more about your student's health than you. So you need to really dig into the medical stuff about what is the actual, what does the anatomy look like in a forearm? I actually got medical textbooks and medical diagrams and 3D models of the arm. I looked at all the different muscle groups. I got kind of into it after, this is just in the last few months, right? But see, this is the thing. I didn't do this before. I just trusted that the medical professionals would know what to do. But yeah, so I dove in and I looked at, like the pronator teres muscles and all these other muscle groups. There's a lot going on in your forearm. It's actually really complicated.
That's for sure. And
even after I looked at it all, I still feel like I don't really understand everything about what's really going on in a very small detail. So I do think that, getting the mindset that you need to take responsibility for your health to yourself and educate yourself as much as you can with whatever resources you can find online, that's going to help. Because it seems like the professional medical industry is missing the mark, or at least it did for me. So unfortunately, that's just kind of the way it is right now. But I hope that can change in the future, actually.
Yeah. obviously we're not saying, don't go to doctors or don't pay any attention to them. It's just that, sometimes you do need to go to them and you have to seek out their advice. It's just that don't stop there and don't fall into the passivity trap where you go, I'm just going to rest and I'm going to suppress symptoms. I'm going to ice and take pills. And that's, at the very least, try to learn more, try to see, is this whole model that they're telling me, is this really how it works? Is this really what the problem is?
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying I have all the answers. I mean, there are some cases where there are people that are going to need surgery, extreme cases, and also, I don't have all the answers. But
not only that, but
keep questioning.
The symptoms that you're experiencing might actually not be tendonitis. They could be like early onset MS or other neurological diseases that are degenerating, and it might not even be what you would normally think. So that's a reason you would actually go to a doctor for sure, is to rule out that those are the problem, and they would give you tests to make sure that you don't have those issues. So doctors are definitely not useless, and all I'm saying is this is my own personal experience. As it's definitely rough, because if it is the tendonitis, it does seem to be something that they're not treating super well yet. But I think if we somehow got this information into their hands, then they could start treating people and see better results and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'm just going to, I think, add one more thing here. It's just too bad that there isn't more communication and that doctors don't really have time to read their own medical research and whatnot, it seems to me. And there's such a dramatic disparity between what the general practitioner medical doctor knows and thinks and recommends versus what the orthopedic surgeon knows. And not that it's just, if you could sit there with an orthopedic surgeon and they had a scan of your tendons, they would be talking in probably a different language than what your general practitioner would be. They know that it's usually a degenerative problem, not an inflammatory one, and they have some interventions like PRP, the platelet-rich plasma injections that you received, which is something in between. It's not full-on surgery, and they're actually trying to stimulate inflammation. They're trying to kick off a new round of healing in your tendons versus trying to suppress that with anti-inflammatories. Although, of course, sometimes they go that route too, and they'll give you a cortisone shot, which is the last thing you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I read a lot of your warnings on the cortisone shots, and luckily I never got one. The doctor did offer me one when I was complaining about how bad it was, but I don't know. I just had a bad feeling that it wouldn't be good. And I'd seen football movies where they're giving cortisone shots to people at their knees, and then they had problems later in life, which is hilarious. So I just got a little bit wary of it, and I was like, nah, it's okay. So I kind of dodged a bullet there.
You did dodge a bullet there.
Yeah, but for people who have taken cortisone shots, what can they do? Are they able to recover, or are they in a much worse place?
Well, it depends on how many, of course. It's one of those things. I think the damage is often exponential. 1 is not the end of the world, but 2, I think 2 is way more than twice as bad. It's probably 3 times as bad, and then you get into that third one, and maybe it's 9 times as bad. It's pretty bad. You're really heading down the road toward worse degeneration, and more likely that you're going to need more intervention. And the medical research is really clear on this. It's unavoidable. So it's sad that they're using this stuff. But why don't we move on and discuss how Pianist can be proactive in preventing one of these injuries in the first place? Yeah.
I think that's actually, for people who, I'm guessing someone who's listening to this probably doesn't have any pain because they wouldn't have searched it. But for people who are teachers who are, or even if you have pain and you want to help spread the word for other pianists not to be in pain, or even just other musicians too. Yeah, I think prevention is way better than having to actually treat it, right? What's that saying? A pound of prevention is...
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So actually, I'd be curious, what would you say are the ways you can prevent it? Because I think this is probably more up your alley than mine.
Okay, I'll chime right in then. I would say number one, really pay attention to the early warning signs. That little bit of tension, that muscle fatigue, any stiffness, even losing a little bit of precision or coordination. That's telling you something about your muscles and what's going on. And really take care of those muscles as best you can. If you can release adhesions before you get significant restrictions, it's so much easier then. You're way ahead of the process. Think of it as like a continuum. It could be in stasis, it could be stable, but it's often either getting better or it's getting worse. And which are you waiting until the symptoms are telling you that you have a problem, or are you being proactive and doing your stretching and some muscle release work, some massage, whatever form that may take, whether you do it yourself or you go to see someone. And then I'm a huge advocate of weight training, of muscle strengthening for the whole body. But I mean, you as a pianist, I mean, you could kind of be thinking about more core and upper body. You can never really be too strong. I mean, you can get to the point where you're working out in a way that's causing your muscles to become more and more restricted because you're being too aggressive. But just to be always doing some resistance training and getting stronger. Do you think life saving?
Do you think it's more of like a low weight high rep or a high weight low rep thing? Or did I even say that right?
I think you can do. It depends on you. I mean, because there's people that are going to need to be doing a very lightweight in the beginning and more reps, but eventually you have to have a certain amount of higher resistance and lower repetition to have real building strength.
Yeah,
and that really helps to get you ahead of the curve, and just for overall health.
Yeah, I could see that. If I was going to advise my own students now, after going through this and seeing what worked and what doesn't work and stuff like that, I think for me, I would rattle off a few things. Like, there's your early warning signs for me personally were a throbbing ache that persisted hours and sometimes days after I was done playing. The difference is I feel like, I don't know, maybe you can tell me this, but when you have your regular sort of lactic acid fatigue, so after you've been doing, like, imagine you're running and sprinting, and then after you feel that lactic acid in your quads, right? That isn't really an unhealthy pain, is it?
No, but we have to dispel the myth that when you have pain the next day, when you have that delayed onset muscle soreness, that's not from lactic acid.
Yeah,
because
that's a real
your body's
problem.
Krebs cycle will take care of that lactic acid within like 30 minutes. It's already been converted. It's gone. So the pain you have the next day has got nothing to do with that.
Yeah. I usually tell students, like, if they're complaining about pain, it's like, okay, is it a sharp stabbing pain or is it like a dull ache? I consider both of those to be pretty bad warning signs for different reasons. But if it's like a burning, like lactic acid, and it goes away, 5-10 minutes after you're done playing, that's fine. Like, that's just your muscles. There are literally pieces. For example, the Polonaise, Opus number 53 in A flat by Chopin. You have to do 2 full pages of octaves where you're going ba 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 ba, like over and over and over again with no breaks, basically. And if you're not conditioned, you literally have to do like conditioning to get your muscles strong enough and to be able to endure that. So for me, I conditioned myself to be able to do 8 pages of it. But I had to work my way up over a couple months to do that. And then that way, when I'm playing it as a performance, it was a breeze. I could just rip through it, no problems, no big deal. But I had to do lots of these things where I build up lactic acid. This is obviously well before I got injured. But then after, that threshold happened, the pain changed. It changed from the burning lactic acid pain to a soreness, a tightness, like an ache that felt really deep, and it didn't go away. And then occasionally I get sharp pains as I moved my fingers. So that was a totally different pain. And I think identifying that can help you prevent the injury, because if you start feeling those things, you need to just stop what you're doing right there because that's causing damage. And then you need to do some like therapy on your arms to get them back into better shape. So that's where you could do what you were saying is breaking up adhesions, stretching, not super aggressively, and then strength training, because that could be a sign that you don't have enough strength in your arms to be able to play that. Does that sound correct?
Yeah. I do want to caution people about the vagueness of symptoms. Unfortunately, the body is not very good about giving us symptoms that are proportional to what we're facing. We have this kind of natural tendency to overreact anytime we feel like sharp pain, for instance. And clearly, sharp pain is not something you want to be feeling. It isn't good, but it doesn't necessarily indicate a dramatic increase in severity. Like the classic example being you have one of these problems and you reach into the fridge and to get a gallon of milk or something like that, and you feel this terrible sharp stabbing pain in your wrist or your elbow, and you think, oh my God, it must have torn or something like that. Well, that's not very likely. That's probably extremely unlikely. It's just an overreaction of your nervous system, which is already on high alert because of the amount of tension and what's going on in your tissues. So what you don't want to do is overreact to that by going, oh my God, I'm going to put on a brace and I'm not going to move it for 3 days. And then I'm going to get very tense about it. And I'm going to be stressed and I'm not going to sleep. And all of this thing kind of compounds the problem.
Yeah.
Versus just going, oh, okay, that was just a sharp pain. It's, it's not constant. It's fine. Don't worry about that. I'm just going to go on, keep taking care of myself and don't stress out about it.
So what do you think? What do you think, what are the daily things pianists should work into their practice routine, to keep themselves in optimal condition? Just like we talked about how they're sort of like Olympic athletes, but for the arms and the hands. What kind of things should they do to maintain their optimum performance?
Boy, we could talk about quite a few things here. I think I want to start with making sure that you get some good cardiovascular exercise in, because that just has so many benefits for your whole body and your mind, your mood, but also your muscles and tendons.
So get the blood flowing, basically?
Get the blood flowing, get oxygenated. There's also something to be said for what's called the lymph flow, the lymph drainage. We don't have to get into that, but people can look into that. That takes cardiovascular exercise, a certain amount of vigorous movement to get that system working optimally. I would add some stretching. I'm sure, I don't know. I'm curious now. Is it recommended in your realm a certain amount of stretching or certain amount of warm up type movements before you're going to do quite a bit of playing or practicing?
Yes, actually. So but actually, funny enough, there's also a whole thing that you need to be able to play what you need to play cold too, because many performance situations don't give you the opportunity to warm up usually. So you'll be sitting there for an hour waiting for your turn to go up and play. Then you're expected to just go up there and just pull out the stops and just play some huge piece cold. And and usually, you can warm up in advance, usually on a warm-up piano in like the high-level performances, but usually you're still going to wait after you've done warming up, then you sit down for another 45 to an hour long waiting to go for your turn to play. So we have to practice performing our pieces cold, even though we also know that you're less likely to injure yourself if you're playing warm. And so usually we warm up with stuff like hand exercises, like scales. Sometimes it's good to play less stressful pieces as warm-up pieces. Mm-hmm. Or just going through your piece slowly first and quietly, and then that allows your body to kind of warm up. I found that one of my tricks to keep my muscles warm was actually to pour hot boiling water in like a Snapple type glass jar, and then wrap it with a towel. And then I would hold on to that, and it would basically keep my hands really nice and warm. And then my muscles would stay relaxed. Unfortunately, you couldn't do much else because you can't do any cardiovascular. You can't just stand up and start doing jumping jacks in the middle of a performance. So there's nothing else you can really do other than try to keep that area heated, because if it starts getting really cold, it's going to get really stiff. So those are for performances, it's kind of limited, but for when you're practicing at home, I like to just get my blood flowing a little bit with, a couple jumping jacks or just a couple basic things. Even doing stretching in advance kind of helps. But yeah, I think everyone does it a little differently, but I do think that what you're saying about getting some blood flow going, I think is huge. Doing some stretches, definitely. I think obviously like diet, sleep also kind of play into it. What do you think? Do you think sleep's really important or not so much? Or
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's when the vast majority of our musculoskeletal repair and regeneration happens. So if we cheat ourselves on sleep, we're just not going to get that. Not that it matters if you, like I didn't get a good night's sleep last night. That's not going to have any significant impact on me. But if it's a chronic thing and you're only getting 6 or 7 hours of sleep a night, that could be a problem.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually reading this book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker this past year, and it was very, very good. He's a sleep scientist who's been studying sleep for like 20 years, and there's some pretty mind-blowing stuff in there. That's anyone who's really interested in their health, I'd highly recommend that book to them. But also diet for sure. What do you think is important in like a healthy diet to keep your muscles and tendons working in optimal condition?
Well, that's a big topic. I have to say that I don't know what the optimal diet for a human being is.
I don't think anyone does at this point. But I think we can all agree it's not potato chips, right?
Right. Stay away from, cut down on, or stay away from as much of those refined carbs as you can, sugar and white flour and whatnot. And there's some things that, like caffeine and alcohol, that we all, a lot of us may use in a certain measure, but those things very, very quickly become detrimental. You get past that for 1 cup of coffee, and then you have 2 or 3, and you've got caffeine circulating through your system and affecting your muscles all day. And alcohol has its well-known negative factors.
Yeah.
And of course, then again, if you're eating sugar all day or drinking sugary beverages, you're going to have another set of problems.
Yeah. So basically, just your standard healthy diet. Do you think there's any like key vitamins or minerals that are really important for muscular development or health, I should say?
The one thing I keep coming back to is vitamin D. I can't prove this, but I have a very strong suspicion that there's a vitamin D somewhat, I don't know if we're going to say deficiency, but maybe suboptimal level of vitamin D in people with some of these tendon disorders. And this is an easy one to remedy. Either you get that certain measured amount of sunlight without having any sunblock on, otherwise you won't get the UV light to produce the vitamin D, or you take supplements. I would be caution people who think they're getting enough vitamin D by eating eggs or whatnot it might not be a bad idea to think about that a little more, because if you're eating eggs from chickens that never see the light of day, how much vitamin D are they going to have?
True enough. Yeah, I agree. I live in a climate where actually it's winter right now, and the sun sets at 4 p.m. right now. So like it's only up for 6-7 hours a day. And even when it is, it's sometimes just hidden behind clouds. So I think if I would suspect that, I probably have a vitamin D deficiency as well. Like, cause I get out there in the summertime, but in the wintertime, you're all covered up with, a winter jacket, and it's minus 25 outside. So why would you even want to go outside? Kind of stuff. So,
good question.
Yeah. So a good chunk of the year, I'd say probably a lot of people in certain climates like mine are going to be having that vitamin D deficiency. So I think that's probably a smart idea. Do you think vitamin D has some sort of impact on the muscles themselves, or what's your theory behind that?
I haven't looked into it all that deeply. I've seen some studies. I think it relates more to tendons and ligaments, certainly joints. I should know more about this, but I did. I'm not sure, so I think that's all I'm going to say.
That's a safe move. It's smart too. And I'm glad you're not trying to BS or anything. You're just saying, yeah, I think it is related because I've seen some correlation. And you said you can't prove it, so that's fine. It's still something good to investigate for people. I'm going to probably look into it more as well now that you've said that. Let
me tell you a little quick anecdote about a patient of mine. he wasn't getting better. As it turned out, he had a ligament tear that necessitated surgery, but the symptoms just didn't really line up right. And anyway, he went to see the orthopedic surgeon who was going to do PRP, the platelet-rich plasma injections like what you had. But this is a very well-known surgeon in the San Francisco Bay Area. But what he told my client was that he wanted him to get his vitamin D levels checked first. And if they were low, he was going to have him supplement for a period of time before he even considered doing these injections. Because he had a very strong, and again, he didn't tell my client anything specific. He just says the vitamin D is very important and it's really coming on our radar strongly. And I was just blown away that, here is an orthopedic surgeon talking about nutrition, and he isn't even going to give my client the injections until he goes and gets his D levels tested. I thought, this is revolutionary. This is some kind of watershed moment here.
Wow, that's crazy. Huh. Do you think, I'm curious because I've been taking this, do you think that collagen is good for you for recovery, or not really, or?
I'm glad you asked me that, because I've noticed that's become very popular these days. And so here's the thing. If you get some collagen protein powder and you take that, that's going to be a great source of general protein. And it's probably going to be very absorbable, but it's not going to be a shortcut to making better, healthy tendons and ligaments and other things that are made out of collagen, because your body can't use some other animal's collagen directly. What's going to happen is it's going to get broken down into its constituent amino acids by your digestive system, and then it's going to get rebuilt into whatever protein your body needs in the moment, whether it's collagen or something else. So there's no real shortcut there, and it's almost like it could be I hear this stuff can be kind of expensive, so I worry people are buying something that's, it's basically, okay, I'm buying protein, and it's not going to give me a shortcut to collagen just because it's collagen.
I've heard that vitamin C helps your body make collagen. Is that true?
Absolutely. I probably should have mentioned that as another, the two supplements that are on my radar are C and D. And C is for that very reason, that you have to have enough vitamin C for your body to synthesize collagen. And if you're deficient in that, you're going to have trouble repairing things. And another anecdote that I have to tell you, it's kind of disgusting, but I've had some clients who are dentists, and one dentist I was talking about this with him because he had tennis elbow. And he says, oh, yeah, I know all about that. My patients that smoke, their sockets never heal properly, which is, we're talking about collagen repair from when a tooth's extracted. And in the smokers, they're depleting their vitamin C so much that they're having trouble healing.
Oh, wow. So vitamin C is pretty important then.
Yeah.
So it sounds like vitamin C and D are your two biggest and most important vitamins to try to help your body heal itself.
Yep. Unfortunately, they're both cheap.
Nice. Bonus.
And the sun in particular.
Yeah, the sun is definitely the freebie of the group for sure. Cool. Well, do you think there's anything else we need to cover?
I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a bit here. I think maybe it's time to wrap it up and say goodbye. But before we do, why don't you tell people where they can get in touch with you? Plug your sites.
Yeah. So I've got a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/piano lounge, or you can just Google how to play piano, and you should probably find my site pretty easily. Also, I have a website called howtoplaypiano.ca, CA because I'm in Canada. And yeah, you can reach me there. You can reach out on Twitter at Furmanczyk. And I've also got an app on the iOS store now called Piano Planet. And yeah, we have a Discord server where people can talk to me directly there, like IM chat and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely check it out. And if you have any comments or feedback, or if you guys have ideas about what could be good, definitely leave it in the comments, and I'm going to read the comments on this video for sure. And maybe I can reply to some of them as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure the links to your properties are there. If you're listening to this somewhere that doesn't seem to have comments, because this is going to end up in a lot of different platforms, then what you're probably going to see is a link to Tennis Elbow Classroom. You can click that and look around, but it might be easier to do as you suggested and did you want people to Google how to play piano, or is that a search they should do directly on YouTube?
Probably, I mean, it doesn't matter too much, but yeah, on YouTube is probably that's where my YouTube videos are, so it'll probably show up a bit easier there. But they can also just go to my website, howtoplaypiano.ca, and that should work too. And if they're on iOS, we're going to be on Android this year, but yeah, they can Google Piano Planet or search it on the App Store, and that'll also kind of show me as well. And then, yeah, if you join the Discord server that we have set up, maybe I'll give you guys a link if on the YouTube video, that is, for that, and then they can click it and they can talk to me directly there if they're interested. But yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. And I also want to say that I am so grateful for what you've done for me. Like, this struggle that I've been on, it's been a decade and a half, and it means so much to me that I'm actually recovering. Like, my level of hope, my happiness is back. About 2 months ago was the first time I was able to write an email without pain. And it was just a huge milestone. I can play piano again. I'm not pushing myself to the same standard as before yet, because I'm still trying to gradually ease my way back into it. But I can play piano right now. I was playing today. I don't have any pain anymore. And
wonderful.
I want to thank you for helping me to understand what was going on.
Oh, you're so welcome, Andrew. Thank you for sharing that and joining us today, and for all that you're doing.
Thank you, man.
I'm so glad you found me, and you reached out to me too a couple months ago, because this I think this is going to be helpful to people. Once again, that was Andrew Furmanczyk, and this is Alan Willett from Tendonitis Classroom. If you're not already here, I invite you to click on over and read my piano-related injury article, or watch the video if you're on YouTube. You'll find the links to those and to my social accounts, as well as Andrew's links, in the description, if you're listening to this on a platform that has one. I also have dozens of articles and videos at tenniselbowclassroom.com on just about every treatment-related question you may have about tennis elbow and similar chronic wrist or elbow tendon injuries like tendinosis, including the question of heat versus ice, whether wearing a splint or brace is a good idea, the effectiveness of lotions and creams, acupuncture, physical therapy, surgery, PRP, and most importantly, why cortisone shots are such a terrible mistake. If you'd like to learn more about my programs for tennis elbow and golfer's elbow, and how you can learn to treat these vexing injuries yourself, I'll include links to those as well. Finally, whether you're on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, or some other platform, please subscribe and leave me a like or a thumbs up if you can. Thank you so much. This is Alan Willett from Tennis Elbow Classroom, wishing you a speedy recovery and a long career or hobby playing the piano. Let's break your vicious cycle.